Alright, today we're having a look at Director's Cut by Johnny Segment. Alright, so here we are in Director's Cut by Johnny Segment, and start shooting. Take a quick check with the actors beforehand if you like. I'm gonna just gonna try this out. I really don't know what it is, just that we get to control the action, I guess. We're the director. Probably if we chatted with the actors that we would have a better idea of what the heck we're trying to do, but that's okay. Let's just jump into it. We're shooting a... Oh, I should press that. Okay. We're shooting a comedy, and we've got to choose the right scenes, but I don't know how. Someone's at the door. What is it? There's an icon in the lower right corner. What should I be doing now? I'm getting lots of points. I brought you a lovely candle I found at the market today. Be careful, that candle table's an antique. I'm pressing buttons, but nothing. Wait. Am I controlling this? Oh, okay. I am, but I'm not doing it well. Oh, I see. Kind of? Like, can I only switch between the R1 and L1 candle? What if I want to focus on the table? Should I? What? Dino! What is this? I mean, it's weird, and I don't dislike it, but I'm so very confused. Off air. What happened? Weren't you paying attention? I thought you were a world-renowned film director. Obviously not. Come back later and we'll shoot it again. Cross's doorbell. There's a close-up of the door whenever that's needed. I guess? There's a sound effects editing thing, too. R1 is the sound of howling wind. Whenever the doors open, hold it down. You could have told me this before we did the shooting of the other scene. L1 is the sound of the doors slamming. There's a lot going on here. How much time do I have left? We've only got 32 seconds. Okay. Sure, I guess. I'd have to write all this down. I mean, it's neat and it's interesting, but there's a lot. I'm gonna have to go through this again, but we're gonna talk about it back at the hub, and we'll see you there. Terrible director. I'm a terrible director. I'm so sad. My terrible directorness. And we're back, and Director's Cut by Johnny Segment, and it's something that's quite outside my usual wheelhouse of what we tend to look at here, but I do think that ultimately it was a yellow square. There were definitely some issues with presentation, but I did enjoy it for what it was. And what it was, we kind of got a feel for it, although I breezed through the instructions a bit. You are a director, you're doing a comedy, you're supposed to be using the R1, L1, X button, and triangle button to control the different cameras. And you want the cameras to be on certain actions or certain characters, and if you can link them up just right, you get a better score and you get more praise from, I think, maybe the producer at the end of the story, and then you move on. There's also a second segment that was added on later that uses the same controls, but this time for sound effects. And again, you're trying to match up sound effects to the actions and increase your score. Although with that one, there isn't any extra praise from anybody at the end of it. You just kind of progress on to the scoreboard and move on with your life. And for what it was, as I said, I had a pretty good time with it. It's something I generally tend, just for my own enjoyment, my own playstyle, I do tend to focus a lot more on platformers and puzzle platformers, and to some extent like auto-scrolling shooters. Those tend to be my favorite genre. But back in the day in LBP2, and kind of a big part of the advertising push was that, hey, you could make any genre of game in LBP2, and I don't think that was precisely true, although, I mean, there were a lot of folks that were really trying to stretch their muscles and capabilities with what the engine could do, but just limitations of the system, I think, kind of ended up quote-unquote naturally sorting things out into the types of levels that we tend to see most often if you're just jumping in. But to come into these kind of weird little experiments, it's really, really fun, and I really do enjoy them. Now, as I said, there were definitely some issues with it, but the biggest ones that I found were in the main section, in the actual controlling the camera section, and the directions are kind of, they're attached to a stagehand that you can talk to before actually getting into the director's chair, and we just kind of breezed by that. And I can understand why they made the decision that you would need to choose to interact with that character in order to get the instructions, because hey, maybe somebody's playing this for the second time or the third time, they don't want to go through the entire spiel over again, but it does mean that somebody who just jumps in is not going to have any idea what is going on. And the instructions, this is something that's handled differently in the SFX section, but the instructions are not actually displayed on the screen when you're playing the level. So as you saw in the kind of first impressions playthrough, I had no idea what I was doing. I figured out midway through that R1 and L1 did something. I had no idea that the X button and the triangle button were doing anything, and I didn't really know how to track how I was interacting with the level. Now, something that's told to us in the instructions section is that when the clapboard, the clapper shows up, that's supposed to indicate that you've got the camera where it ought to be. And I could see how, you're jumping in and out, playing this multiple times, and you're going to get quicker on those cues. But otherwise, there's not really a lot telling you when you're supposed to be moving. There aren't a lot of cues in the actual scene itself that's like letting you know, hey, you should switch here really quick. So you're kind of always interacting after the jump. So that's a bit of an issue. I found that to be a little bit more of an issue with the SFX section, because you can be a little bit late on the jump with the camera and still make it look kind of natural, just thinking of the framing of a scene, but you can't really be late with sound effects. Like, if a door is slamming, it's got to sync up with the door slam, but there's no visual cue for the player when that's going to happen. So you just kind of anticipate it and hope you hit the button at just the right time. Now, on the other hand, what the buttons actually do were displayed at the bottom of the SFX section. So at least you didn't have to keep 4 different controls in mind while you were playing, which you needed to do with the main section. And while that does kind of break the diegetic wall, so to speak, communicating to the player and not making the scene natural and cohesive, frankly, I have trouble remembering 2 different things at once, so to kind of have a reminder scrolling up at the bottom of the screen, I did definitely appreciate. Something else I appreciated was you could, as they told us in the main section, you could go into the dressing rooms and interact with the characters, and while that doesn't have any bearing on the actual level itself, it doesn't have any bearing on what you're doing, it was kind of cute. And you got a little bit of a humorous, or with the second character, the older character, a bit of a dark humorous aside to match up with that and kind of make it feel a little bit more robust. The comedy sections, the actual story videos that you're directing or doing sound effects for, it's a bit of your mileage may vary how funny they are. They feel very old school sitcom style, not even old school, from the perspective of today, which would have been 1990s, but old school from the perspective of me, which would be kind of 1950s, 1960s, because I was a kid of the 80s and kind of young teen in the 90s. So when I think old school, you're pushing back, and that's kind of what the humor felt like to me from those scenes, but still, I enjoyed it for what it was, and I enjoyed the level for what it was. It was a nice little step back into the Wayback Machine, seeing, you know, how people were experimenting a little bit with the format of LBP2 and seeing what could work and what didn't necessarily work. So I do heartily recommend this one. It only takes about 3 minutes to go through that main sequence, the main movie sequence, and not too much longer to go through the sound effects sequence, so you're not looking at a really big time investment here. And you can go back into it and see if you get a better score. Surely you're going to get a better score than mine. It wasn't that great because I didn't, know what I was doing, but that's okay. I had a good time with it, and I think you will too. And that pretty much does it here, this go about. So for me, Bisco, here in Tokyo, to all of you out there, wherever you may happen to be, thank you, arigato, sayonara, see you, and ciao.